The Genie energy license comes as little surprise to those who say Israel is now using civil war in Syria as a distraction for strengthening its position in the Golan Heights.
One would see the timing as very deliberate. It sees Syria in the midst of this crisis. It knows that there is no pressure on it to make peace. How could Israel make peace with a regime that is, barely holding on to power across much of Syria? Clearly no pressure on it at all. So there may be a calculation amongst Israeli business and others within the government that right now might be the prime time to make such a move, because it may be decades before there is an authority in Damascus with whom there is any pressure to make a deal over.
It may not be the first time Israel has used world events to bury its dubious moves in the Golan Heights. In December 1981, it applied Israeli law in the part it had occupied and all but labelled it annexed territory. At the time, the rest of the world, and more importantly Israel's main ally America, was preoccupied with other global developments, including martial law in Poland and the Gulf of Sidra incidents in Libya. The Reagan administration went only as far as calling the move inconsistent with the Camp David peace accords, and even Israeli opposition members complained of being taken by surprise.
Thank you.
This time around, and again, the license to Genie Energy is a murmur in global news, and the US State Department says while it's aware of press reports about the license, it doesn't have any further information. For Israel's closest ally and bravest advocate, America seems to have been kept far away from this potentially game-changing decision.
Well, Israel is sovereign state. I think there is a history of telling the Americans when it's convenient. And sometimes, to be honest, the Americans rather not know. Sometimes you want to know, sometimes you don't want to know. But sometimes it's convenient to know less than to know more. Israel probably will argue it's our own business if we develop oil fields. The Americans don't tell us when they develop oil fields. Of course, the implication of any act which changes the status quo, which doesn't exist, in the Golan Heights, have much further implication.
What we should be doing.
Those implications are something President Obama might want to consider. Some analysts are suggesting the granting of the license to Genie Energy is designed to put pressure on America ahead of the president's visit to Israel later this month. This will be Obama's first visit to Israel as president, and one Middle East expert at the US-based think tank, the Brookings Institute, says the license is part of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to keep changing the facts on the ground.
And we have seen such facts on the ground in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And as you know, there is already a political struggle over the mineral resources off the Gaza Strip. So all of this is very much up for grabs. In the West Bank, we've seen the Israeli authorities exploit Palestinian natural resources, be it water, quarries, cultural artifacts. So there is a prior record here as well.
America remains Israel's closest ally, supporting it with billions of dollars in military aid. It's often accused of using UN Security Council vetoes to help ward off international condemnation of Israel. But the US is also seen as the chief peacemaker, having played numerous roles in mediation between Israel and its neighbors, whether Egypt, Palestine or Jordan.
Together on a bold journey.
Chris Doyle says it's time for the international community to speak up against even the seemingly smallest of moves.
The thing that troubles me right now is the incredible silence of the international community on this issue. There's been hardly any political comment on this move. There's not been much media coverage even. What is the implication of this? It means that the Israelis who are watching for the reaction will take the lesson, maybe we can get away with this. Maybe, perhaps we will be able to drill for the oil in the Golan and use it and exploit the resource without an international outcry.
Indeed, one American-based author alluded to Genie Energy's heavyweight political connections as being a major driving force behind the move. The man at the top of Genie Energy is Efi Eitam, a 60-year-old former Israeli cabinet minister who was well known for his right-wing political views. He received the Medal of Distinguished Services in the Yom Kippur War, but it was in the late 1980s that his notoriety became apparent. In the first Palestinian Intifada, 2 Israeli soldiers under his command were convicted of assault after beating a Palestinian man to death in an order they say was to break their bones. The military courts ruled Eitam's violent behaviour had become the norm and that it was taken as an example by those under his command. For 2 years, Efi Eitam received no judgment, and then Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was elected to office. Just days after these celebrations, Eitam was let off with a reprimand and a recommendation against promotion. It was said by one of the papers at the time that any appeal of the decision to Israel's High Court could have implicated his senior-ranking officers, including Rabin himself. And 8 years later, Eitam was promoted to Brigadier General. Efi Eitam lives in the occupied Golan Heights, apparently unhinged by the illegality of his home. He's known for his views against native Arabs and once told an American newspaper Palestinians could be indiscriminately killed. He was quoted as saying, "We have to kill them all." And he isn't the only hawk in the firm. The strategic advisory board of another subsidiary, Genie Oil and Gas, includes the right-wing former US Vice President Dick Cheney, media magnate Rupert Murdoch, and Michael Steinhardt, who's the co-founder and a major supporter of a multi-million-dollar Zionist organization called Birthright Israel. In an interview with an American journalist last year, Steinhardt insisted that there was no Palestinian people.
It's a business venture. These people that you mentioned are looking to make money. It has more to do. If there is a... And again, we don't know if they'll find any oil, won't find any oil, but assuming that they'll find oil, these people, if you, as we know them, again, Dick Cheney comes from the state of Wyoming, which is very rich with minerals. And this is a state with a small population, almost like the Golan Heights, but a much bigger state that lives on there. He came from this background. People like Rupert Murdoch, they're looking to make money regardless of political situation.
There's no evidence to suggest that these men have any direct influence over the license granted to Genie Energy. But it does raise some important questions over Israel's motives, and crucially, it clouds the economic or environmental agenda it purports to have. And there's no apparent history or evidence that should indicate oil might be found here. So, could this be a political maneuver under the guise of business?
I think if the opportunity was to have to explore oil in the Golan Heights presented itself 20 years ago and 10 years ago, the Israelis would have done exactly the same. I think the fact that there is civil war is neither here nor there. I think the Israelis would have done exactly the same. Whether it's right or wrong, it's a different matter. But the fact that this kind of thing, it took place in Sinai back in the 70s. As long as there is, the Israelis treat the occupied territory, as long as there is no agreement, they treat it as it's part of Israel.
You would assume that as we haven't heard anything from these shareholders, that they're perfectly content with what Genie Energy is doing, that they are going into occupied territory, they haven't raised any objections whatsoever. And I think that they should have done. I mean, why has Rupert Murdoch not said anything? I don't think it's shocking, because I know that he is a warm supporter of Israel and has been. But it's not something that I think, a figure of such importance and stature, and likewise Vice President Cheney, I don't think this is something that they should be party to at all.
We asked Genie Energy and the Israeli government for interviews. Genie Energy didn't reply, but we did get a statement from the Israeli embassy in London, in which it said Israel has long sought to negotiate a resolution, but that with Syria in a state of civil war, there is currently no Syrian authority with whom Israel can reach such an agreement. It denied the granting of the license has anything to do with the Syrian civil war.
You know, since '67, the status quo in the Golan Heights has, in other places, changed considerably. There are Israeli settlements there, and peace doesn't look that close. And under these circumstances, I think the Israelis, you ask if they care, I don't think they'll pay too much attention to criticism on this one.
I want to put to you the statement that the Israeli embassy gave me in response to my request for an interview. They said, Israel has long sought to negotiate a resolution, but with Syria in a state of civil war, there is currently no Syrian authority with whom Israel can reach an agreement. What would you say to that?
That's a very good answer, but to an entirely different question. That is the answer to a journalist who may be saying, why aren't you making peace with Syria right now? But it's not an answer as to why they are exploiting, essentially looking to steal the mineral resources of another country that belongs to another people, that is not theirs.
It's worth noting again that the license only allows Genie Energy to look for oil. There's nothing to suggest it'll find anything, nor that it's guaranteed a license to develop or extract anything it does find. But it's the timing that raises doubts over Israel's attitude for peace, and the political baggage Genie Energy comes with puts into question the integrity of the deal. It may be so that Israel is looking to advance its hold on the heights in a hope that someday it'll be worth much more, should there ever be an exchange for recognition. Perhaps rightly so, the Syrians don't seem to be bothered. A far bigger fight overshadows this supposedly minor development. But where there is oil, there is sure to be money, and plenty of it. The Syrians already desperately need this money. Theirs is a country broken into pieces. Homes and hospitals have been razed to the ground. Schools and once glorious places of worship lie flattened. Thousands of breadwinners across the country have been killed or maimed. Some have simply vanished. And hundreds of thousands of people face a future of homelessness. This time it's unlikely there'll be a museum town to remember the Assad regime's killing spree. There'll instead be an urgent need to rebuild and recover. This may be a simple exploration license, but its implications could prove to be magnificent. For anyone thinking of peace 10 years down the line, it's time to put things right. Now.